I like fantasy games, I like dungeon crawlers, so I was very curious when I heard of 100 Swords, a game that is marketed as a deck building game with a dungeon crawling idea behind and a fantasy theme. When I hear descriptions of this kind, I immediately think of Thunderstone, which is a game that I played a lot of times. That's really a game that I like very much, and sometimes it can take a while to play, can be pretty complex to teach to new players, especially if they are casual gamers or non-players of board games. So here we have a game that seems to have some ideas similar to Thunderstone, but in a much more manageable, simple, and portable format. This is the whole game. This is the base set. So I was curious about the game, I gave it a try, and I'm gonna tell you about it in this video. Now, as you can expect from a deck building game, you start with a deck of cards that at the beginning are pretty crappy. Literally so. This is a game with some quirky humor, and I like it. I like the fact that they finally acknowledged it, that the people that you start with in a deck building game are not heroes or not paladins, or just crappy cards that you get tired of during the game and you want to vaporize, you want to get rid of. So here you have some crappy swords that, yes, are crappy, and they're named and they're labeled as such. And then you have an awkward sword, which is, well, you know, awkward but a little bit better, and then boots. Now, these cards have a number of gold, I don't remember what the technical term is, but the important thing is that victory points. These are victory points that you score at the end of the game. The cards will also produce movement points, combat points. This is the icon to indicate that these cards belong to the deck that you have at the beginning of the game. Cards also can be played for energy, which is when you play a card from your hand, turned by 90 degrees, ignoring all that the card says, usually unless there is an effect that works on energy that is based on you playing a card for energy. And there are some cards that you can acquire or rent. We'll talk about that in a second. And they have that icon there. That's the number of energy points that you need to spend. I talked about renting. You see, these cards are rentable as indicated by the R letter printed on them. That means that those cards are available on the table. You can pick them up temporarily by spending the corresponding energy, and you get the advantage here. You get the keyword. Here you get this advantage here, and here you get this other advantage. But at the end of your hand, they are returned to the central area where the players can also rent them. Then you had the dungeon, which is formed of, this is an initial card. The dungeon is formed of various types of cards, monsters, swords that you want to acquire, obstacles, and things like that. The dungeon is shuffled at the beginning of the game. There is a boss that will be shuffled towards the bottom of the deck. Then you take 5 cards and you put them in a line by the deck, and that they're face down, which is an interesting idea. The dark dungeon still needs to be explored, and those cards represent the dungeon that the players are indeed try to explore, seeking danger, glory, and loot. When it is your turn, you will play cards from your hand for various effects. You can move. Now, when you move into the dungeon, you always start from the leftmost area and you move this way. You cannot move back, so you always have to move from the left to the right. And you have this card here that you use to indicate your position in the dungeon, because you can only perform actions in the room in which you are. So I spend some movement points and I move down the dungeon, then maybe I have more cards and more effects and I can move more. When I get to an area, to a new area, I can look at the card. Some cards I can look at and then put them down. Some of the cards, monsters specifically, need to be revealed. And also there are the cards that may have effects that, not a single monster, that they have effects that force you to reveal them. Monsters usually prevent players from moving past them unless you defeat them, but there's an exception, which is when you reveal the card and you put it face up, there may be another effect that you need to reveal, but you just pass by the monster. Imagine all monsters in the dungeon be napping as they are asked to be on watch. So you pass by them, you wake them up, they freak out, and then they start their watch job. Then they actually start preventing the player from going past. That is, you look at a monster, you reveal it, the turn it is revealed, you can do you can keep moving, but other players later on, they want to go past the monster, have to defeat the monster. So you can play cards to generate movement points to move down the dungeon. You can play cards to defeat monsters, in which case you play a combination of cards whose combat value, thereby the fist, equals or exceeds the value of the monster, and you defeat the monster. The monster goes, because of this icon, in your scoring pile. Cards that you acquire go in your deck, so according to traditional deck building philosophy, they will be then shuffled into your deck when you need to reshuffle. But cards with monsters that you kill and other cards of that kind go in your scoring pile immediately. Different from Thunderstone. I actually really like in Thunderstone the fact that the treasures that you acquire, the monsters that you kill, go in your deck and they clutter your deck a little bit. So that's killing too many monsters early on actually weakens your deck, and there is a balancing element there. And some cards, as we said, have energy. You acquire them by spending energy, and that simply means, if you so wish, discard them from your hand or play them at 90 degrees. So you use a mix of effects that really are simply movement, combat, and energy. Yes, some obstacles require the keyword, and you need a card that has the keyword. The worst come to worst, you can always use that card there and rent it. Once a turn is over, you simply slide all of the remaining cards to the left. You fill the slots, the empty slots in the dungeon, so that you have a line of 5. Now they're all face down, but in an actual game there may be some of them that are face up from the previous turn because they're monsters, because they're the game effects. And this is how it works. You repeat the procedure, building up your deck little by little until the boss is defeated, or until there are no cards, there are not enough cards to refill the dungeon with 5 cards, with 5 rooms, so whichever happens first. And that marks the end of the game. At that point, the players count all of the victory points, that are these yellow numbers here, that they have from all sources, their deck, their hand, their scoring pile, and that determines who the winners is. This is the game. Do I like it? Question. Is it a good game? Previous question or preliminary question. Is this a game? I'm not 100% sure. It almost feels like a conversation piece, just because to me what makes a game is decisions. Tough decisions, significant decisions, intricate decisions. And here, there aren't really many. There are cases where you go down a dungeon, you turn a card, and obviously getting that card is the only thing that you can do, and the only thing that makes sense to do, and what you're left with doesn't allow you to do anything else. The fact that you do not see any or many of the cards makes it completely luck-based. Yes, you may say that fits the theme, right? Well, but if we were going down real dungeons, yes, but the beauty of dungeons is the adventure, the sense of adventure that you have, the sense of tactical decisions that you have. So we may have a realistic dungeon in the sense that it's completely random. You may get lost getting nothing interesting while another hero is exploring another part of the dungeon and getting a lot of loot and having a lot of fun. Then we have a realistic dungeon, and then I think, what the heck is a realistic dungeon? Why should dungeons be realistic to start with, since they don't exist? We want a fun dungeon. This is not one such dungeon, because you go down the dungeon, and I find this, I said, okay, should I go past? I can push my luck, and maybe yes, I go past and I find something better. But most likely, when you push your luck, when you start spending cards to move, then you usually do not have enough to do anything else. So the push your luck element potentially would be very interesting. In truth, in actuality, it doesn't really do much for this game. In most cases, players will simply settle for the first good, decent card that they find. It's like an okay card, I'll go get it. Because the chances of getting other stuff that is better and you can actually afford if you keep going down the dungeon is low, unless yes you create effects, etc., etc. But in truth, I almost feel like I almost feel like the game wouldn't be all that different if instead of having the dungeon and all that, you simply turn 2 cards face up and you tell the player, buy 1 of them. Okay, done. And then next player buys 1, and then the player maybe gets 2. Roll a d2 and determine if there's 1 or 2 cards to buy it. I don't get the sense that there would be much more involved. Yes, there would be much less. Yes, there would be some, and there are cases you look at what is left and you make an obvious decision instead of making an obvious decision when you go down the dungeon and you flip a card face up. The decisions are just too obvious for the game really to be interesting. And it's not a game that lasts like 2 minutes. Still, you have to go through quite a bit of dungeon. Now, the decisions being obvious, each round is really quick, but is it worth it? I don't know, not so much. As a filler, there are fillers that playing 5-10 minutes that are simpler than this one, more intuitive, and frankly more fun. 5-10 minutes, you're done. I don't know, I'm thinking of Martian Dice, Zombie Dice. They are their own small thing. They work very well. This one, I love the art. That I have to say, the art is really fun. But that's about it, because as a filler, it is a little too long for my taste, and as a non-filler, there really isn't enough here to keep my attention going. Unless again, it's a conversation piece, something that you play when your mind is doing something else, like you're thinking about something else, you're having a conversation, you're sleeping. This probably is a game that you can play in your sleep, sorta, daydreaming. So when I play a game, I like to get in a state of like mental flow, to be carried by the design, to be completely immersed in the story. And with a filler, of course, I don't need the situation, the immersion to be so intense, but I want some reasons for interest. This game here, unfortunately, doesn't give me enough of that. It's too luck-based, 1 or 2 obvious decisions each turn is really not enough for me, and not any ways for you to plan ahead, to have any sort of strategy. You just react to that 1 or to those 2 cards that make sense for you to have a look at each turn, and that is that. 100 Swords. I was hoping for a light, simple, portable filler treatment of Thunderstone, and well, this is not it.